Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you are here for the first time, you would know that I discuss a lot about UAE legal matters and from a legal angle, legal perspective, specifically the real estate investments that people do here and how they structure it and what are the precautions. Now I see there's a lot of data in the market that comes on to not just the off-plan but also secondary real estate disputes, and it is something that I always say that can be saved or prevented with just some basic information and knowledge. And if you as an investor or somebody who's going to live long term in a house and trying to close that house are going to be there, then you also can take note of these points and then use them and implement them along with your brokers or agents or representatives, and then you will also be apprised of this information. And it's very critical that you know these key steps which can then save you costly mistakes, because I do see some simple things sometimes which can be taken care by mediation or by simple a settlement between both the parties, but they go long and long, maybe because of some silly or small error. So today's video is going to be about everything you should be saving and looking at in terms of entering into this contract F, which is, I'm going to tell you now, which is the main contract of this video. So the first thing is that let me walk you through the process of how a secondary transaction, a resale of a property is being done here in Dubai. The first thing is that you as a buyer or as a seller will look for the other party, right? So you are essentially, if you are a buyer and you're going to look out for a house, you will reach out to different agents, different brokers, and you will select a house. You sometimes like that property, keeping in the goal in mind, and it's okay, you want to close it. Now next step is that your agent is going to tell you to sign a contract F. The contract F is basically a DLD approved RERA form, which is mandatory for any transaction, resale transaction, to go through in Dubai. Now this contract F has some standard clauses which you should be aware of, but there are also an option for your agent or broker to add your specific clauses. Even you can get request that, and these specific clauses save you from a lot of legal hassle later. Now I do see that people have mortgage properties going for sale, right? So there is additional terms and conditions that you can add, that's saying that if my mortgage doesn't go through, then I should not be penalized for the same. So all these small clauses which can be key differentiator, because remember the consequences of either you not fulfilling the deal or the seller quitting or backing out from the deal can be the 10% deposit dispute, and sometimes that 10% is not even less. It's obviously the buyer can come after the seller or the seller can come after buyer if any one of the parties are trying to dispute the transaction or trying to retract back from the transaction. So it's very important, if you are a mortgage client, then that additional term needs to be there. If you are a seller, you need to be aware that you need to have a bank account, and sometimes having this clause also in the additional terms is very important. If you are going through blocking process, then explaining the blocking process to you by the agent is primarily the duty of the agent or the conveyancer of the firm. But if you are not able to do that, then you can also take third party opinion on that. And by that I mean you can understand what your responsibilities are, what your duties are as a buyer or the seller of the transaction. The second thing that I feel that people should know about contract F is there's a standard clause which says that in 7 days, if there is any kind of dispute arising, the party should try and mediate this. Now in this situation, either if your broker or the other side's broker are pally with each other, are going to talk to each other, then it's very good for them to get this mediation done. But I always say that have a third party mediator who is not who is taking this contract from a third party perspective, who's not emotionally inclined to you or to the other party. It's just going to tell you that what are the consequences if the person who is not abiding by it is going to face, or the other person's financial loss as well. So just to get everybody on the table, the contract does allow 7 days of this amicable settlement time. The third clause, again, as I always say, that when it comes to such kind of dealings in real estate, it's a lot about trust. It's a lot of money that you're going to put through. Even the seller is going to get some, maybe some, they will get some better options after entering into this contract. Try to get the maximum of 90 days. If you think as a buyer or a seller you need such time, if you need time to get NOC from the developers, because if it's a mortgage property, essentially a mortgage property cannot be transferred. So they will need NOC from the developers. NOC in the sense for developer to be okay with the transaction. Then you fix a day to the trustee office and you go there and close the deal. But even though this process does look simple, but it has its own nitty-gritties, which for a smoothless transaction, you should be aware of. And who acts as a escrow in this whole transaction? Escrow means somebody who will hold the 10% deposit given by the buyer towards the seller. This 10% is essentially there to cover you as a buyer or seller as somebody, so that the other party does not back out, and just to protect the other party. And who is the escrow of this 10% check? Is the seller's broker. Now the seller's broker's responsibility is, if there is any kind of dispute arising or forcible possibility of the transaction not going through, they are supposed to keep the check with themselves till the very end. And by the end, if there is a dispute, they will still hold it as a trustee. They're not allowed to give it to any of the party unless there is a Dubai court order, or unless there is some kind of amicable settlement agreement on that point. Only after that the check would be returned. And in case the deal goes through, then the check will be cancelled on the day of the transaction. So it essentially means that this escrow, the seller's broker, will act as the escrow, the agency will act as the escrow account, and your funds of the 10% deposit is protected as a buyer, and as a seller you have some security, right? And last point, although I have many points to discuss and it's very case specific, but as a fifth point, I always suggest everybody entering into contract F to understand what they are going to face. For example, if you know you are going to travel in that duration, then you should have the clause, or the other party is going to travel, then you should have a clause of having a POA who does all the legwork behind you, because in so many things you would be needed physically, even if it's signing off a check and you have to pay that to the developer for the seller. So you can imagine that there are small nitty-gritties, by the way, which will be delaying the buyer's, the seller's work, and which will be also delaying your work. And by the end, maybe the evidence becomes so much that it becomes your fault. So it's essentially very important that if the other party or yourself are going to be outside of the UAE, have a POA appointed for this completion. And if the possibility, you also need to check the rules of who can give the check in the trustee office, who can take the check. So all these small things, they turn out to be big battlegrounds, and we don't want to do that, because you are buying this as an investment. You want to start it on a happy note, you want to understand. And sometimes even cooperating with the other party for small things really help. Like, it's not necessary to get into disputes all the time. For example, if there is a storage linking that has to be linked before the contract F, there is another thing that needs to be linked to the property before the expiry of the contract F, then you should be accommodative with the other side if they need your help or assistance to discuss this with the developer, that you are going to be the new owner. I mean, so many other things, right, in which the nitty-gritties really matter. And that's our video for today. I could talk a lot about these, but I try to educate you on the basics, because obviously every case is different. If you need some kind of legal help or consulting, then do get in touch with us. Our details are in the description box. And I always believe that knowledge sharing is equally important as much as knowledge absorption. And for that, I have my WhatsApp community where you can join. The link is on the description box. As well, you can join my newsletter brief on LinkedIn, which I share daily some development in the UAE legal landscape, and I hope that helps. Thank you.